Welcome to the Women in Impact series, also known as WinImpact. We bring together leading women in impact investing to talk about the innovations and challenges for financial advisors who want to offer impact investing options. We have a special edition today for the audience out there that cares deeply about the environment. Many of you usually hear about impact investing in the context of investments made in companies, organizations, or funds with the intention to generate a measurable social or environmental impact alongside a financial return. So, WinImpact is excited to have this interview today to talk to a woman who is addressing environmental issues in a unique way. We felt the audience would benefit from the perspective of using research and ideas to create sustainability, in this case, with the environment. I was not aware of how investors can make an environmental impact in Africa until this guest told me about it. I know this audience will be just as fascinated as I was about the E of ESG, environmental impact work behind the scenes. I'm Rosanna, and this is Emily.
We're your hosts for the WinImpact series, and today on episode 3, we're talking to Sofia Faruqi, the Senior Manager at the World Resources Institute. We are especially excited to have you on air with us today to explain an area of impact that is a little less known, land restoration. At the World Resources Institute, Sofia created, designed, and led the Land Accelerator, which is the first startup accelerator in the world focused on land restoration. She is also the lead author of The Business of Planting Trees, which was the most viewed report by the think tank in 2018. Prior to joining the think tank, Sofia started her career as an investment banking analyst at JP Morgan and later worked at a pension fund, hedge fund, and multifamily office. She has won multiple investment awards, and her articles have been published in numerous outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and National Geographic. Sofia is a CFA charter holder living in Washington, D.C., and in her free time, she enjoys scuba diving, traveling, and writing. Sofia, thank you for clearing time on your schedule. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our series.
It is so great to be here with both of you. Thank you for having me, Rosanna and Emily.
Well, we are so excited to have you, and thank you again. So, in your LinkedIn header, Sofia, you state, finance for a better world. You have an incredibly impressive background, Wharton MBA, CFA, former portfolio manager turned impact evangelist and thought leader. It's pretty bold to make such a big change and follow your interests. What led you to make the leap?
That's a great question, Rosanna. Let me maybe back up a little bit. When I graduated from Dartmouth back in 2007, at that point, I had one thing in my mind, which is how do I get a job which pays as much as possible? And keeping that very simple factor, that led me to investment banking at JP Morgan, which then led me to the investment management world. And so I kept continuing down this trajectory of starting from analyst to associate to portfolio manager. And intellectually, I felt very engaged by the work. I loved learning about new companies, new industries, really soaking it in every day. But emotionally, I felt like there was no real connection between myself and the work I was doing. And during my 20s, that's when there started to emerge a much more mainstream conversation around climate change and how it's affecting us, and around the other environmental issues that we have essentially been living with and that are becoming worse every day. I didn't know if I could make a difference on any of those issues, having absolutely no experience in the environmental space. I also didn't know what exactly was needed and where would I even get involved. But over time, this sentiment that I needed to actually be part of the change I wanted to see in the world became stronger and stronger. Then when I turned 30, I decided that, well, I've been in the investment world throughout my 20s. If I don't make the leap now, when will I? And so I just sort of jumped off the cliff with no parachute, but I had the good luck to land in an incredibly fascinating and gratifying role at the World Resources Institute, where I have been now for almost the last 5 years.
That's really exciting. We know that organizations like the World Resources Institute support innovation and entrepreneurship needed to restore degraded forests and farmland around the world. So these organizations mitigate climate change and alleviate poverty while creating value for investors and businesses. This is really important work, and we'd love to learn more. So can you tell us a little bit more about your work at World Resources Institute?
Absolutely. So the World Resources Institute is an environmental nonprofit that works at the intersection of people and planet. So always looking at how can people and planet work together to create prosperity. And that means our work cuts across several areas: forests, food, water, climate, cities, energy, and also energy. In particular, when we look at forests, we realize that we've already lost half of the world's primary forests. Those ecosystems are not coming back. The remaining half of the world's forests are under great threat, and every day we lose more and more. I think the statistic is we lose the equivalent of one football pitch every few seconds. Wow. And that trend is continuing. At the same time, as we realize that we need to conserve the existing forests, we also realize that a lot of damage has already been done. We have forests that are now gone. We have agricultural lands that are no longer producing. They're massively depleted after decades of monoculture and potentially poor management practices. We also have areas that are affected by natural disasters, such as floods, and where the land is just no longer able to function, either ecologically or even from a productive standpoint. So what that means is, in the world, we have an area the size of Latin America that would benefit from being restored. That's what led to the Global Restoration Initiative at the World Resources Institute taking root around 8 years ago. Well, once we started on the restoration trajectory, we realized that, okay, we need trees for everything. Literally, they produce the air we breathe. And without trees, there would be, the climate crisis would be so much worse. And in fact, any climate solution relies on there being more trees to absorb carbon emissions. At the same time, we need trees for food, for timber, for recreation. They purify the air, they purify the water we drink. So they just create so much value for us every day. And most of us, including myself before I joined, are not even aware of how much trees do for us. So when we come to restoring forests and farmland, usually we're talking about growing trees, either integrating them into croplands or pastures, or allowing forests to regenerate naturally, or doing much more active hands-on reforestation projects. Now, when we look at trees, we realize that they produce public benefits such as oxygen. None of us owns it, and we all need it. So there's that public good element of it. At the same time, they produce some private benefits. For example, if I have a mango tree in my backyard, which I wish I did, then those mangoes are mine, and I will hopefully eat them every day. So keeping that in mind, when you have public and private benefits, then solutions need to involve both the public sector and the private sector. And it was when we were starting on that question of how does the private sector engage here that I got involved at the World Resources Institute. What we have realized is that there are thousands of entrepreneurs around the world working on landscape restoration, and they are, and so essentially we've been working to support them through the Land Accelerator, which provides them with skills, mentoring, networking that they need to scale up their businesses. And now also we are adding financing to the picture to help these community leaders essentially create prosperity for the farmers they work with, and also for the environment on which we all depend.
That is a lot of great information, Sophia. And, you know, a few things you said.
Great information.
No, it's great. It's great. And a lot of things resonate. In fact, I was typing and writing away. And, you know, earlier you had mentioned you wanted to be a part of the change you wanted to see in this world. And, you know, you also mentioned that a public and private sector collaboration is necessary to help the environment, and that alignment is so important. And I love the fact that you mentioned about trees, right? They are everywhere, but they provide so much value, and you know, it's one that there isn't a lot of awareness around. And so all really great points. Glad we could touch on them, and, you know, glad that our listeners can access this podcast along with all the resources that are relevant to this discussion, so that they can get more awareness about how to help the environment, even in their own little way with a mango tree in the backyard. On the topic of financing, would love to kind of segue into a little bit about the Rural Prosperity Bond that you guys launched on September 29th, and congratulations, by the way. Our listeners are always looking for new and innovative initiatives for positive impact on the world. The press release states that the Rural Prosperity Bond will provide loans to small and medium-sized enterprises working in land restoration in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. This is really fantastic. Can you tell us more about it?
Absolutely. So the Rural Prosperity Bond started with the recognition that these entrepreneurs focused on restoration very often ran into a gap when they were looking to raise money. Now, you might be wondering, why does that gap exist? And doesn't that exist everywhere? So if we look at how capital is distributed around the world, for example, let's take a guess. How much of the world's stock market consists of the US? If you had to guess, what would you say?
60%, 70%?
Yeah, you're pretty close to the mark. It's around 50%. So basically, half of the world's stock market capitalization comes from the US. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at Africa, which has 4 times the population of the US, and you guess what is the market capitalization of the entire continent as a percentage, what would you guess?
Oof, 10%?
It'll go lower.
5?
Lower.
Ooh.
2?
Lower.
Can you go lower?
I actually couldn't find an exact number because it's under 1%.
Wow.
So if we look at where the money is, it is just not evenly distributed at all. We have a very disproportionate amount of capital in the US, and there are many parts of the world that are just completely starved of capital. So what we see, for example, in some of the countries where we work, such as Niger or Malawi, is the exact opposite of the super hot Silicon Valley tech startup scene, where people are able to raise a lot of money, often just based on ideas. We see companies in Africa and elsewhere that have shown consistent growth, that have been around for a long time, that are extremely well managed, and they're unable to raise $1.
Wow. Huh.
So there's just a real gap there. Another factor of it is that for a lot of these companies, they are not in what sectors that a lot of investors currently consider sexy. They're not in technology. They're not working on the next cool app. They're doing a real hands-on work with farmers in the field. And that just does not sell as well in today's day and age. And so that realization that there's a very sort of systemic issue going on here led us to realize that we had to come up with a solution. And that's what led to the Rural Prosperity Bond, where we're providing small amounts of credit to these businesses to enable them to grow.
Those are some great stats, Sophia, and I've been educated just during this podcast. Wow.
Yeah.
Lots of gaps to be filled there.
Very surprising to hear that less than 1% of the capital is in Africa, considering how many people are there. So on that point, actually, now that you're on the other side, going from managing people's money as a portfolio manager to bringing awareness to funding for these, as you call them, less sexy opportunities, how does that change your perception of impact investing? And has that definition changed over time?
So that's great. That's a great question. Now that I sit on the other side of the table, I am now able to see both sides of the equation. As an investor, I used to look at companies that were under $2 billion in market cap. And I used to say, oh, these are so small. How can we invest in these companies? And they are classified as small caps in the US. But now on the other side, working daily with entrepreneurs, I see just how incredibly difficult it is to go from 0 to $2 billion. And I also see that the majority of people do not even have the opportunity to play the game. They're not even in the conversation. They're completely excluded from it. So that brings up the question, what is the role of impact investing in actually changing the game to make it more inclusive, so that not only the players represent the world we live in, but also the results create benefits for a much wider group of people? So that's one thing. The other thing that comes to my mind is the short-termism that we often see in the investor community. So for example, with publicly traded companies and also with smaller companies, there's often a great pressure to hit quarterly numbers, and sometimes even monthly numbers, sometimes weekly quotas. So there's that intense pressure to really show that short-term performance, and that is really not compatible with nature. Some trees live for thousands of years. And in fact, even these periods like months, quarters, weeks, these are very human-made concepts that don't really have much relevance when you come to nature. So the short-termism is another thing that impact investing can play a very important role in addressing if we see impact investors actually taking a different approach and thinking long-term. Because creating change, it does not happen overnight. Trees grow slowly, communities change slowly. And for change to be lasting and sustainable, we do need that longer term perspective. So I would say the inclusion and the longer term mindset are two areas where impact investors can have a really big impact.
And those are such great points. Knowledge is earned, and like you mentioned, right, inclusion and having that longer term mindset means that people really do understand the impact of their actions and how they can contribute. I know one of your favorite activities, Sofia, is that you love to read. And I also know that you read more than one book a week at times. Where do you find the time, and what books would you recommend for our audience here?
You're right. I love to read. I don't actually know where I find the time. It just somehow happens that I always seem to be near a book, and then I pick it up and read it. I would recommend a couple of books. One is The Bright Continent, which is a great book for people who are new to Africa and really trying to understand some of the trends and the opportunities there. Another a good book in terms of entrepreneurship, Creating a Cash Cow in Kenya is a good one, which walks through an entrepreneur's journey in Kenya. Other books about entrepreneurs that I've enjoyed recently, Bad Blood is a good one. And then Shoe Dog, both of those in the US context. Really good to read about these journeys that they have made.
Very nice.
Great books there.
Definitely taking notes and adding these to my reading list. And we'll, of course, be sharing these on our website with the rest of the resources that we're providing. So, Sofia, one final question for you. As a woman who's become a thought leader in impact investing and finance, what comes next for you? And could you offer some advice to our listeners who are interested in making an impact, pursuing their impact dreams, or impact investing in general?
Absolutely. So I would like to invite our listeners here who, if you're interested in supporting entrepreneurship we're currently working in Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. do reach out. Would love to share where we are and get you involved with our initiatives focused on supporting entrepreneurship and innovation for landscape restoration. I will also add that in terms of what comes next, we are now just starting to capitalize the Rural Prosperity Bond with grants and debt. We expect to launch the pilot in early 2021. And we are also just continuing in this pandemic environment. We're now providing support to our entrepreneurs virtually. So far, so good. I will also add that it's been really great to be here with both of you today. When I joined in the space, I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured it out. I have confidence that every listener here who has an interest and feels their heart is pulling them in a certain direction will be able to also figure things out as you go.
That's great advice. The heart cannot lead you in the wrong place. Well, thank you so much for that vote of confidence for our audience here, Sofia. You know, it means a lot to us. Well, congratulations on the bond. It was very exciting for us to hear more about that, and, you know, much success towards it. And Sofia, you know, thank you so much for sharing your important insights here on the Women in Impact series and joining us to win impact together.
Thank you, Rosanna. And I hear congratulations are in order for you as well.
Yes, very exciting actually. Today, Just Invest hit a milestone. We surpassed the $600 million assets under management mark, and a lot of it was due to the launch of Panorama, our new household taxamizer. So thank you for that. I guess today is a big day of congratulations all around, and obviously to the team.
Wonderful news.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Listeners, please visit justinvest.com to access all of the resources mentioned during this interview and to learn more about investing with intention. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. This is a wrap for us, and until next time, let's win impact together. Investing done just right with Just Invest. Be well.